All right, this might be the most important conversation we have about Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott all season. An opportunity to move on as early as March. Is that attractive to you or offensive? Would it be of interest? Okay, here's what it comes down to. The cap hit to cut Dak Prescott after 2025 is very similar to what it would be after 2028. $90 million compared to $70 million 3 seasons later. If those numbers are similar and he's not performing at a high level, is there an advantage to holding on to him for the duration of the contract? And plus, if you do move on next spring, you could also eliminate a quarter of the total obligation to him and that $240 million contract, creating a clear advantage to moving on if the performance isn't there. So the question is, how good does Dak Prescott have to be in 2025 for you to want to continue to build around him? And if he posts the same numbers as last year from an efficiency standpoint, would you move on or keep trying to give it a shot? Let's do this.
The only thing else I got to say is, how about this, Cowboys? Yeah!
All right, welcome in. How About Wow brought to you by Bet Online. Sign up link in the description below. You can also scan the QR code and get $250 in bonus bets and 100 spins on their prize wheel. Being in Texas, New Bear, it's hard to find a good place to wager on games online, and Bet Online is terrific for that. So, I mean, you know the topic, my man, and here's the deal. Up until the 5th day of the league year, the Cowboys can move on from Dak as long as he can pass a physical and opt out of a combined $62 million left on this deal for the 27 and 28 seasons. You effectively cut a quarter out, a full season of that 4 years. That if he's not playing well, would that make sense to you? How the hell you doing, buddy?
I am so excited to be nerding out with you. The making the life math of this stuff make sense has been a fascinating conversation in the homework assignment portion of How About Wow. And I just, starting with kicking the can down the road and thinking about them doing that over and over and over again. And the shifting dynamics of this are just fascinating.
Yeah. So, do you want to kick the can again? They've restructured every year since Dak Prescott's rookie contract. So do you continue to kick the can? Do you cut the man, drop bait there, take a $90 million hit, or wait for the end of the contract where it will still be $70 million because of that can kicking they've been doing for over a half decade now? Or do you just stand pat and sort of let those cap numbers hit at $68 and $75 million and try to still create a winning roster out of that? It's very difficult either way. I think the only right answer is hit all of your draft picks, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's something like $220 million over 3 years if he plays the whole thing out, plus dead money after that. So, you look at around the league and talking to, friends in other cities who love their quarterbacks. Our guy down in Cincinnati, Wayman, with Burrow, thinking about what a Hurts or a Mahomes looks like and how different teams do different things. The Cowboys are doing some scary shit.
Yeah, I mean, you're walking a tightrope trying to manage these contracts and compete every year. And the great news is, when you do look at this, because the cap is going up, those cap dollars in the future are not as costly as far as being a percentage of the overall salary cap as they are today. But, waiting for the seasons to play out and for the cap number to start coming down really isn't a great option, New Bear. And I think that's the piece of information about the Dak Prescott contract that I have not seen covered from the Cowboys media at all, and how interesting possibly the opportunity is coming up next March if you decide to move on from him before the 5th day of the league year. Obviously, the best thing is that Tyler Guyton plays great, Cooper Beebe plays great, Tyler Booker wins, a spot on the Rookie of the Year team, and your run defense fixes itself, and Siobhan Revelle is a great coverage rookie, and you go win 14 games, and what are we talking about? They're in the conference title game, and Dak plays great. I think you do need great protection and a good running game to get MVP Dak. I don't know if you can get that again, though. Right? So if you don't get that this year and you're looking at, wow, do we need to add a tackle, a running back, a defensive lineman, and a corner to create a winning environment out of Dak? Maybe at that point it would be best to move on.
Well, and that's before you look at Micah and what he's going to get. If TJ resets the market more than Myles Garrett, Micah is going to reset more than TJ Watt. And as you look through them having something like 20 and change, Micah's contract in and of itself is going to be double that going into next year. You already talked about Tyler Smith. Did you say Bland? Did you say Ferguson? Did you say? I mean, there's a handful of other, and that's before you do any of
Tyler
the
Smith.
things. Yeah, so like the accounting tricks that San Francisco or that Philadelphia, whether you're talking about selling portions of the team and getting that upfront investment, or you're talking about options on top of there's base, there's guaranteed, there's the option that can convert, right? There's the way you can just manipulate this thing in so many different ways that affects the dead money year over year over year. And then that's like we talked about in the homework assignment portion of it, 5-year voids versus the 2-year immediacy, right? If you decide to cut bait where you can split it. And it's like you look at Dak's number and you go, well, if he's Tom Brady or Brett Favre or someone who can play into their late 30s, early 40s, then yeah, it's a simple conversation because you're buying yourself time to deal with this thing eventually while you're winning along the way.
You have a guy who's like Hall of Fame level, could be an All-Pro at age 37, hasn't had the catastrophic injuries that Dak Prescott had. At that point, it's like, man, this is cyclical, but we know we got our guy that's our ticket to ride if we can ever put the team around him. I think if Dak struggles this year, that concept is kind of in question, isn't it?
Well, not only is it in question, but it begs further questioning, not just the accounting and making the math work or doing funny stuff with it that is even beyond my reach, right? But looking at this team and asking the simple question, how far would they have to go? What would it take? Because if it's wild card and done, or even if you win the East and it's still one and done with a home playoff game, what does that look like going forward? Where are you telling yourself the truth and saying we have the guy to take us to the mountaintop? Or are you just kidding yourself? And in reality, you really got to crunch numbers in a way that you probably didn't think you were ever going to have to.
And I love that because it really leads into this next idea really perfectly. I do believe Dak Prescott can win a Super Bowl. I think he's a good enough quarterback to win a Super Bowl. Do you agree with that, New Bear?
1,000%. I think there's 4 guys in a class by themselves that no one would disagree with. Or if you do, you're bringing in the homerism, you're bringing in the, like, how are you lying to yourself, fan of what team, right? But it's Mahomes, it's Jackson, it's Burrow, and it's Allen. Those are basically
absolutely. And then there's another 10 or 15 guys that I think could win, and I think Dak is in that group. If you have a top 5 defense, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and a good running game, I think your Kyler Murrays and Jared Goffs and all these guys, Matt Stafford's, I think they can win. But here's what I was getting to. The only way the Cowboys will win it is with a quarterback of Dak's level or better on the rookie contract, because they're not aggressive enough with how they manage the cap like Philadelphia has been, making sure they have 15 impact players. Like the Cowboys are going to struggle to even get to double-digit impact players because you just can't draft and retain enough of them. But you know how you could if you had a Joe Burrow or Dak Prescott level player making $5 to $10 million a year, freeing up that extra $50 million that they could use to go buy the extra, 3 to 5 players I believe that you need to compete with the Eagles or the Chiefs.
Well, and you're not talking about just Pro Bowl. I mean, Mitch Trubisky was a Pro Bowler. Let's go, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about all pro, future Hall of Fame level guys. Because, I think about Dak a lot, relative to a guy that I think is close to that top 4 from a talent and skills perspective and has a coach and is maybe a player or 2 away. We're having a similar type of conversation with a guy like Justin Herbert. And we all saw what happened to him in the playoffs last year. He threw more picks in one game than he had all season. All it takes is one game to bring the house of cards down on the narrative around a rising star. Dak's no longer that. Dak's the vet. Dak's the $60 million man. He's QB1 of America's team, the most popular football organization in the world of all time. No questions asked. And they have no problem with that. The problem becomes, bless you,
thank you. I'm struggling, bro.
Because they've kicked that can. It's not just about the engagement farming stuff. It's not just about what is the price of admission, to kind of pay the dues, to put butts in seats and have those conversations 365, 25, 8, all the different elements that we talk about with the star and with the brand. It's really about what it takes away from the team on a position by position basis, on a year by year basis. And
Yeah.
when you're sitting here talking about not just Dak Prescott or not just the quarterback for the sake of it, it's anybody in this position. Because if it's Arch Manning, we're having the same conversation because Tyler Smith's gone. We're having the same conversation because it's Micah Parsons and the merry mad band of misfits running around out there, and you're basically Joe Burrow trying to outscore everybody.
Yeah. You know, and I think there is definitely an interesting point to be made because it is all teams. Like once your quarterback has proven to you that he's good, but he's not like GOAT status, is it worth it? Are you turning your wheels, paying him and trying to build a championship team?
Yeah.
Can you pay an average quarterback like that under normal circumstances and still be able to afford a supporting cast around him that could win a Super Bowl? That is such a more difficult needle to thread than winning it with Mahomes or Brady or Brock Purdy on his rookie deal, for example.
Well, and here's where this gets really fascinating is from a roster building perspective, they've put Dak in a position, assuming everyone rises, assuming Guyton is right, assuming the running back by committee or someone emerging as the bell cow, but CD, GP, and Fergie, like we always come back to, right? He has no excuses if everyone's healthy this year from an offensive perspective. He has no excuse not to be 29 points a game right at the top of the league lead, putting points up, burning light bulbs out in scoreboards. And if he does that, and you go on a run and you get to a point where you run up against a buzzsaw like Jalen Hurts with his hair on fire and you lose in a shootout, how tough is the question of, are you kidding yourself that you're right there and he's the guy versus we have all these other problems to fix?
Yeah. I think those are perfect. And how realistic is it that you could fix all of those other problems inside the 3 years that's left on his deal and he wouldn't continue to decline with further injury and age? Because I don't think the Dak Prescott trajectory is going up like a lot of quarterbacks are at 31. They're reaching this place where their experience allows the game to slow down and they're still athletic enough to take advantage of it. I think Dak's injuries have robbed him of that window significantly. But just to be clear, I do believe Dak is still good enough to win a Super Bowl. Do not get me wrong on that. We all want to see this go well, but I do kind of want to reset it and say, if the offense isn't good this year, that would be 3 out of the last 4. In one of those years, he led the NFL in picks, even though he only played 12 games. Last year was 8 games, again, due to injury, and he led the NFL in turnover-worthy plays by a wide margin. You follow that up here in 2025, I don't know how you could then believe it's realistic to make a winning formula out of whatever Dak Prescott is doing. I don't care what the stats look like, but if you have high turnovers or if you are, not winning games, if you're stuck at 22, 21 points per game, something like that. So then you also have to consider that whether you do it in March of 26 or 3 seasons later in March of 2029, you're looking at between either a $90 million cap hit to do it next spring or 70 or 75 to do it 3 years later. I don't think I could see the advantage of moving on. And that leads me to believe with this schedule, New Bear, and with the lack of a running back, we need one of these young running backs to hit for Guyton to be good and for the Lamb and Pickens things to pay off to our wildest dreams, I think, to make this offense good enough. The defense might be bottom 5 again, so I could see losing. I could see lack of stats and us to very well be having these conversations in the morning news and on all the evening news channels by the time we even get to the Thanksgiving game.
So much of this comes down to how he plays, because you always talk about the movement skills. And I think at the risk, the last time we talked about this, I said, at the risk of getting myself blown up in the comments, I'm going to throw a couple names out there that might surprise you based on quarterback athleticism, guys that we would prototype, pinnacle, throw the ball a mile, throw the ball accurately, run, get you a first down, run to escape and throw the ball all the way back across the field. Just do whatever it is you're going to ask him to do. And the two guys that I was really fascinated by relative to not proving you wrong, but proving a point were Steve Young and John Elway. Because do you know what the most amount of times Dak's run the ball in a season? It's 75.
I don't know. Okay.
It's 75.
Like 50 or 60. Not that many. He's not a
to
quote. What's that?
I said, sorry to jump the gun on you. I didn't give you a chance to answer. But you were going to say something in the 50s, right?
Yeah.
It's 75. And I think there's this misnomer because he was a running quarterback at Mississippi State who really stayed for his fourth year. And Dan Mullen in the Tim Tebow offense didn't run him quite as much or quite the same way, and also had him throwing swing passes to running backs and check downs as a focal point, almost sacrificing a little bit on Saturday to help prove this guy as a Sunday guy to then go be the benchmark program guy as he built it. And Steve Young, the reason I bring him up is because everyone thinks about him with those great NFL films, and he's running the ball all over the field. There's those great stories about him going all the way back to BYU, being like shirtless, looking like he was chiseled from granite. And he was one of those guys that when you saw him on the field before the game, he was terrifying to think of. That's the quarterback. And I mean, Steve Young was one of those dudes. He only ran the ball. The most he ever ran was 76. And you go, okay, so that's a fascinating thing, Newbear. What are you building towards? John Elway, over 16 years, his 17-game average, right now that we're playing 17-game seasons, 56 carries, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns. You know what Dak Prescott's 17-game average is? 58, 270, and 4. It's the same exact thing when you look at it as a counting stat number. What has to change for Dak is the way he moves, the way he uses movement. If they're going to continue to ask him to roll out, to half roll, if he can learn how to sit there and play on time and on target, we're having a different conversation potentially for a decade if he wants to, because he's going to put in the work. I mean, we've seen the offseason videos, but if he's going to be a guy who's running around with his hair on fire, who's holding the ball too long, not just throwing the ball late over the middle for bad picks late in blowout games, but who's doing that where there's a chance to hit the guy in the flat, particularly if it's Pickens, if it's CeeDee, if it's Turpin, if it's one of your guys who can go do a lot with it. That's what John Elway had to learn how to do. John Elway, everyone remembers the helicopter spin in the Super Bowl. That's when everything is on the line. In order to get there, you turn around, you give the ball to TD. Okay, we don't have TD, but they had Rod Smith, Ed McCaffrey, Shannon Sharp. Are you telling me that Pickens and CeeDee Lamb and Fergie can't be a facsimile, a reasonable one of that?
Well, I mean, I would just say like Dak is not John Elway. You know, and I would also say, like, even though Dak's stats say maybe he's running almost as much as he did as a young man, those yards are just different. I don't know how you would quantify that, but the first 3 years of his career, Dak was running for scores that the team couldn't get any other way. He was getting first downs that were grit and toughness. And now I think he's getting yards because the teams have retreated into these cover 2 shells so much that it's like, okay, I'll take this 5 or 6 yards, but the defense is surrendering that. He used to take yards from the defense when they were fighting tooth and nail to stop him. And he was in the process of doing that when he broke his leg against the New York Giants.
Right.
You know, so I think number one, Dak is not John Elway, not even close. And I'm not going to beat you up over that, but you know, I think you know that. But number two, like, you know, Dak has gotten to a point in his career where he's got to be so careful with the way that he plays with his legs. And as a result, he can't be the difference-making quarterback, you know, with his legs when the other team is refusing to try to stop the run because your running back sucks. Like, you know, the running backs that are making that level of impact, I think you could justify, hey, let's pay this guy. You know, he's going to get us, like, what's Josh Allen, 600 or 700 yards of rushing and all these touchdowns.
Oh yeah, fantasy heaven.
Yeah, you can absolutely pay that guy because he has a trump card for you when the defense decides we're going to drop and cover.
So Josh Allen's a really interesting point because I always think about him like the direct genetic mutation of Ben Roethlisberger. They have the same exact measurables down to the 40 time. People forget how freaky of an athlete Ben was early. You know, you might remember the touchdown run in the Super Bowl. Surely you do, against the Seahawks, right in the Pacific Northwest. Everyone in the world throwing
pretty
stuff
hammered that night, but yeah, saw some highlights.
the thing that Josh Allen had to do last year, the reason he becomes MVP is because he's playing the game a different way. Is there still a few bonehead plays here and there, but there's not a few bonehead plays in every game where he's trying to say, let me test my laser cannon rocket arm or the triangle button that's built into my ass, because he's that special. What I'm talking about with Dak is really dependent on the line. What I'm talking about with Dak is probably mostly dependent on the rookie they took at 12 and the center who's still got to prove if he's a center. Because if he's clean in the pocket, I want to see him almost play Tom Brady vintage 2007. I want to see him come to the top of his drop and stand still and either throw the ball for a touchdown, throw the ball for a first down, or throw the ball to his grandmother in the stands.
All right, I want to talk about what happens next. We got a lot more content coming on this very subject here. And how about where there's a cold beer for you? I really did like that line, New Bear, of having a triangle button in his ass. I think that painted the perfect picture for us. But how about Wow, brought to you by Bet Online. I was so happy to find out that they wanted to partner with our show, because Bet Online has been my favorite online sports book and poker place for a long time. You can bet on horses. You can get casino games at Bet Online. Sign up link is in the description. Also, the QR code right now up in the upper right hand corner if you scan that. And new members will get 50% of their initial deposit matched in free bet credit with no restrictions applied on that. So this is a great opportunity for those that want to, get a little sports extracurricular activity going on during their football season. But, you're in a state or you're in the part of the world that doesn't make it easy for you. Bet Online does.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm looking forward. I saw a parlay earlier today. It was like 12 legs, and I was looking at it. And I was like, man, okay, yep. And then there was just maybe one or two that was like, okay, that one might be a reach. But the bet was $33 and the payoff was like 10 grand. And I think I immediately texted you, what is the ultimate Cowboys parlay? I think we're going to do a whole show on some of the fun we're planning to have.
Let's do it. Let's take 33 to 10 grand. That sounds fun. Or even like $3 to $1 grand.
Yeah.
$3
to $100 is a win.
All righty. Let's talk about what would happen next in this scenario, right? And I don't think it's too far-fetched, first of all, because the clauses are in the contract, right? Can we just acknowledge that? The Joneses put these in there for a reason. Maybe because he was trying to come back from the compound leg fracture, maybe because they're just smart and they realize that, sometimes as quarterbacks move into their 30s, they stop playing well or they get hurt again. And then, you're really up creek without a paddle, like they were with Tony Romo. Okay. They did the same thing with Tony Romo 9 seasons ago. So the first thing to look at would be Joe Milton, right? If Dak gets himself cut after 2025, do you even want to draft somebody? Do you want to go to Milton? I mean, I guess it depends on what your draft position is. And if you're sitting there in the number 1 hole and Cade Klubnik just put on a Heisman type season, maybe you go ahead and take. But I would be excited to see Joe Milton.
Not only do you have to be excited because of the traits and the 80-yard viral TikTok and the speed and everything that he brings to the table just as a specimen, he costs $1 million. Right? Like the risk with him is, that's basically saying, okay, we're going to eat 60 of Dak's and then $1 million to find out if Joe Milton is the future. So you're paying your quarterback 60. That's a reasonable number in today's game for a potential franchise quarterback. And on top of that, if Joe Milton hits, now you're talking about Sam Darnold max money, like 100 for 3, because he's going to want to hit free agency again while he's still in his prime. He's not going to want to do a 4, 5, 6 like Mahomes 10-year deal. He's gonna do a relative prove it while he also gets some money in the bank. And if you're talking about 61 or 63, whatever the math works out to be, because you walk away from Dak and you got to split 92 over 2.
Let's do that real quick. It'd be a $90 million hit over 2 years if you post June 1. So you have 60 in that first year and then 30 in that second year.
So 61
of Dak after the 2027 season. Yeah.
Yeah, 61 to find out if Joe Milton's him or if Arch Manning's next. That's a really, because even if you're losing, and even if it's like bad, 3-14, 4-13, there's going to be a whole lot of fun to be had. And I honestly believe, based on what he showed in week 18, what he's going to learn this year, and the fact that if you're eating the Dak money and you're looking at, like, what is Pickens going to do then? right? Is Pickens going to bounce, and is someone just going to come in with a Godfather offer, or does he want to run with CeeDee, and is he willing to take a hometown discount? There's a whole lot of things that go into that, and what's fascinating about the Joe Milton side of it, right, is he's going to have the shotgun seat to this thing, and we might actually get a preview of it if Dak's hammy gets tight week 11, week 13, week 15 at some point this year, because they have those super compressed like 5 games or 4 games in 11 days, 3 games in 10 days type things. We might get a reasonable look at Joe Milton with
I think we will. I mean, if I had to bet on it, I would say over under on Dak missed games somewhere has to be 3.5 or 2.5. You know, if I'm in Vegas setting it, chances are something's going to happen, that's going to put Joe Milton out there. So maybe after that 2 or 5 games or whatever it is, you will have had your answer and be like, nope, Joe's not our guy or Joe is our guy. But my favorite thing about the Joe Milton idea relative to Dak and his contract is, and I'm not sure the Jones family would even look at it like this, but, it gives you a guy to try for a year. And if it hits, you're in great shape. But if it doesn't hit, you kind of got like a tank season going into that 2027 draft that probably has Arch Manning and some other guys, doesn't it?
Oh, man, it's got the Patrick Mahomes cosplay, the Raiola kid from Nebraska, one of my alma maters, and it's got the Lagway kid that everyone thinks is going to be a 3-and-done at Florida. It's not just this upcoming 2026 class with Nussmeier and Sellers could actually, I think, because he played less than 4 games his first year at South Carolina. Sellers could do what Arch Manning is doing. He could keep going back. He's not a COVID kid, but he could come out next year or the following year. So, yeah, I mean, 2027 is shaping up to be a Jeremiah Smith, if you want to get away from the quarterback. I mean, there's a ton of legit first-round talent in 2027.
Yeah, so, there's the option there. There is, obviously the option in 2026 if you do see enough of Joe Milton. But I think ideally, Newbear, what do you make of trying to get on the other side of that $60 million hit at least before you start the toll on your next quarterback? I mean, I think if Troy Aikman is sitting there regardless, you're going to take that guy if you're totally sold on him. You got the 8 on. Nice. If a clear guy like Cam Ward is there next year and you've decided to move on from Dak, I'm taking him, but
real quick, don't forget when they drafted Aikman, Jimmy Johnson took his guy in the supplemental draft from the U. They went and got Steve Walsh, gave up next year's one, and then they actually flipped Walsh to New Orleans when Bobby Hebert was having contract stuff and got ones and future picks back. So that would mean it wasn't just the Herschel Walker trade that Jimmy Johnson was wheeling and dealing. They were doing crazy stuff back at the turn of the 90s. And
that was a different time where they were looking at it like we have to give ourselves as many chances as possible as having the right quarterback. I think
or you're the Cleveland Browns.
The angle now is let's get a guy in here on his rookie contract that's going to allow us to overspend in other spots.
So before we talk about the 92 divided by 2, 60 and 32 real quick, let's just do one thing for Cowboys Nation. This isn't just a Cowboys problem. This is a problem literally everywhere. So Jalen Hurts, as crafty and creative, and as we talk about the Philadelphia Eagles being arguably the best run franchise in all of sports based on how they manipulate things. Jalen Hurts in his age 30, what would be his age 31, so a year younger than Dak, with a Super Bowl and with all the different things that are a part of the Jalen Hurts narrative, Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles are staring at a $97 million cap number. Now, they obviously have the ability to rework that and say, hey, you're 31, we believe you're still playing at a high level and you're going to play, and they can do things with that. They have time. But even the Philadelphia Eagles are going to they're going to come due. The rent is going to be extreme inflation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, it's not a problem what the Cowboys have done with this Dak contract. It's what smart teams that are trying to contend do with a lot of their best players. Let's push it into the future because we got to try to win now. I actually think the biggest problem in this is that the Cowboys haven't done it with more players. They haven't taken a left tackle off the street who can play at a Pro Bowl or All-Pro level and plugged it into this team using that salary cap management strategy that the Eagles have so well.
Well, then the bigger problem is that they set it up so that not only is Hurts set up with that big number in that year, but they've layered other contracts along the same timeline so that if they are in a tank situation, it's a 1 year, it's clean, it's out, we nuke it, we start over. And oh, by the way, on that road, Hurts goes 20, 30, 40, 47. So he's not having those crazy $220 million over 3 year stretches hamstringing you if you stick with him.
Yeah, because he's just on his second deal. Dak's now on his third. So he's got an extra 4 years of restructuring the deal and pushing it into the future that's sort of snowballed on him. Okay, let's reset here. At the top, the premise was with Dak Prescott, do you kick the can? Again, do another restructure. That'll be in 2026. Another big part of his salary will be added. What's the second most likely thing? You know, if we can expect them to restructure, is the second most likely thing them not and letting him play on a cap number at $75 million? Or is it them actually doing the scenario that we set up at the start of the show, cutting him and, you know, finding their next quarterback?
If they win a playoff game this year and they have an opportunity to figure out how to basically run it back and then add next year's draft class to this team, and Tyler Smith maybe shaves a couple million off here or there, and you got guys who are saying we were so close, we lost on a field goal, or it came down, we was back and forth the whole way. They win a playoff game or two, and this team feels like it's on the upswing again. I don't see any way that Jerry Jones doesn't have any problem eating the number. If he was fine at 60, what's 68 or 75?
You know, I think the thing is that you're taking about another $15 million away. So if they're managing the cap as conservatively and as strictly as they have with targets, if you're not going to restructure, let me bring up the number here real quick so we can be precise on what it would be. I'll share that tab and we'll wait for the Dak contract to load. There it is. Right. So if you don't structure, that's an extra $38 million that you will have on your cap. Right. So it's the difference of not 60 to 75, but it's like 75 or 39, 38. And is that Tyler Smith and Deron Bland? You know, so in that scenario, you're having to let other good players on your roster go to let Dak play at his number and get off of that massive contract sooner, you know, so to speak. But I think you sacrifice your entire season. I don't think you can win like that at all.
Man, it's so tough because you want to root for the guy and you want to see him come back. And you want to see this thing fireworks. GP, CeeDee, let's go. And then you sit here and you go, if it's Heartbreak Hotel one more time, if it's one and done, I think you got to move on. I think you got to go Joe Milton. And then the take we just did, the segment we just did is the move.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's been 30 fucking years.
Right. So let's talk about like what the Eagles would do or what the Chiefs would do, what the Niners or Rams would do if you do go win a playoff game. Right. And this, you know, the fan base is livid again because you lost the divisional round. You win wild card weekend, you lose divisional round, and we're licking our wounds again. But you won 11 games. You know, to me, I would hope that at that point they would say, let's restructure. Let's make sure he's got a left tackle and a running back. Let's bring George Pickens back, and let's actually make a couple additions to our defense that can shore up our run stopping.
Yeah, now
I would hope they would do that.
Well, now you got me thinking about two things. You got me thinking about the franchise tag, and you got me thinking about future ones. Because you bring up the Rams, and you think about everything they did, Jalen Ramsey, Dante. I mean, they went all in. They mortgaged their future to go get Stafford. They already had Goff, who'd taken them to a Super Bowl and was one ridiculous McCourty play away, and one Hoss to wide juke Gronk forever. I mean, that was the ugliest, most boring Super Bowl of all time.
It's so frustrating.
There.
Yeah, it's so frustrating because they got there and, you know, in theory, they have sacrificed their entire future. But guess what? They're probably back at the top of the NFC West this year, or at least back in another wild card situation. So while they did risk their future, damn it, they're so well run that they're back at it again with another shot at the apple. And I feel like the Cowboys try to manage their cap so slowly, like they're turning an aircraft carrier, because they're afraid that if they go all in right now, that the future is going to be just too bad. Right? Oh, we'll be so far in the cellar, it will be unbearable. Well, guess what? The cellar's coming for you about every 4 or 5 years in the NFL, one way or another. You know what I'm saying?
It's
And
literally designed for that to happen. The Tom Brady
Yes.
Patriots were such an anomaly, and that's why they deserve all their flowers, scandals, and everything else included, because it's literally designed for parody.
And you're supposed to ride that cycle to where when everything is great, you give yourself a better chance to win the championship. And when things are bad, you give yourself a better chance to get a high draft pick. But the Cowboys want to treat every season like if we get into the playoffs, we can get it done. And I'll tell you why. Okay? Because from the turn of the century to 2010, 5 wild card teams won the Super Bowl.
Yep.
Before that, only one team had, and after that, only one team has. But in that window where the Cowboys' strategy for the future, the post-Jimmy, post-championship era, was evolving, they erroneously believed that era of playoff football, where all you have to do is get in and anything can happen, was going to remain the case in perpetuity. Now it's really only the 1 and 2 seeds that really have a shot, other than Tom Brady's Buccaneers a few years back.
I wonder if we're speaking of Brady and the Patriots, I wonder if we could almost tease ourselves into a Jimmy Garoppolo situation where Milton could either play well enough in a couple of games when Dak isn't able to play, like when Brady was suspended, and trade him for a 2, or you believe in him enough, because, dude, you know what I can't stop thinking about is if you can if GP is really locked in and this is going to be it, and him and CeeDee really are a buddy cop movie, and we're talking about a half decade of like Moss and Carter but on HGH, like in 2 years CeeDee Lamb is 27, in 2 years George Pickens is 25 years old. Like that's why I'm saying, like, when you think about all this length and all this speed and all this youth, when you talk about Booker, BB, Smith, Pickens, CeeDee, Jaden Blue, like, and next year's draft class, this could potentially go from being one of the older teams to one of the youngest, fastest, most exciting teams in the league. And the question becomes, does Joe Milton show you enough to believe in him to win with him, or do you almost have to run it back with Dak because you need a captain of the ship?
Yeah, I would hope that if they're close, they look at it like, boy, Dak's going to be 32 years old. He's got 3 years left on this deal. And what George Pickens plus CeeDee Lamb just did for us is like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase in Cincinnati. We can't punt on this, and we can't act like our chances are going to get better to win the championship if we let Pickens and Dak go. If you're close, I want to see them load this thing up and actually try to completely build a championship team like Philadelphia does. Like, what's our biggest problem? Okay, how do we get an all-pro at that position?
Right.
That's what they did with Dion and Haley back in the day.
You go give, if you find yourself in a situation where a TJ Watt is fighting with the franchise, you go give him a 1, and you bring TJ Watt and let him run with Micah Parsons. Like, you make those level of moves.
And when we see them do that, I think, that will be the time where I will be willing to predict it. Like, I haven't predicted the Cowboys to do anything in the playoffs for probably 7 or 8 years, because there's always a weakness on this football team that is glaringly obvious as what's going to get them eliminated in January. But this is very exciting. My biggest takeaway from the video, even though Dak Prescott is starting a 4-year contract this year, it'll actually be just as easy to get out of it after this year than it would be at the end. What's really interesting about that is the same does not hold up. After the 2026 and 2027 season, you will not have as easy of an opportunity to save yourself money, both in the short term and the long term. Training camp next week, brother. We are locked in for shows all next week, right? Evening recaps every night of training camp.
Yeah, I can't wait. And I'm actually looking forward. I'll be in California with you for the second half of that first big push, and looking forward to seeing you, to being out on the West Coast. LA, being in LA a long time ago when I was a much younger man was one of the funnest times of my life. And I was hitting some people up about, because Oxnard's just right up the road, and it's such a beautiful part of the country. And I get to spend like 5 days with you chopping it up. I mean, we'll be arguing face to face. We'll be able to interrupt each other easier.
Man, I do look forward to that. But I'm also gonna need me an Elements massage when I get back in DFW after putting up with your grumpy butt there for the week. But jokes aside, I am looking forward to it. And How About Wow is brought to you by Bet Online, brought to you by Harbor Lights, and brought to you by Elements Massage in Frisco, and the 2 locations, one next to the Star and one on Main Street next to the soccer stadium. Let them know we sent you. They'll get you a How About Wow special until tomorrow with more Dallas Cowboys news and analysis. For New Bear, I'm Dawson. How about Wow?